Welcome to the Sky Sports Cricket Podcast. I am hosting this week because Michael Atherton has had an unsuccessful fishing trip up in Scotland. J.R. Hartley, he definitely isn't. So we may chat fishing at some stage, but there's plenty going on in the cricketing world. We have a guest with us again this week, Tim Wigmore, slightly better cricket journalist than Michael Atherton, writes for The Telegraph and is also the author of an excellent book. It's excellent because I got a freebie copy, Test Cricket, A History of Men's Test Cricket, which is dating back, 148 years. Before we come on to that, breaking news as we start this podcast, the PSL has been moved to Dubai, will hopefully be completed in Dubai. And the IPL, Michael Atherton, has been suspended. And with everything that's going on in India, Pakistan, you feel that's the right thing to do?
It seemed a pretty inevitable call, didn't it, after that game in Dharamshala was abandoned. What are the 10 England players, just looking at it through an English lens, 10 England players at the IPL and half a dozen or 7 at the PSL, I think. So obviously we wish everybody, safe travels as regards that. I suppose, it's a hugely sensitive issue and far more important things than cricket, but it's just a reminder of how interconnected everything is and the fact that, that's the epicenter of cricket, isn't it, around the world, the subcontinent right now. So when these kind of issues rise up, then that has significant knock-on effects on the game. India and Pakistan haven't played bilaterally since 2013, I think more than 10 years now. And that seems ever further away now, given what's going on. The only time they do play is in ICC events. And of course, that may be not possible as well right now. It was Gautam Gambhir recently, India's coach, who said that he didn't think not bilateral games, but games between the two countries in ICC events shouldn't happen while this kind of stuff is going on. So all that will play out. But Tim, you wrote about it this morning, and clearly a significant issue for cricket, just looking at it through the lens of cricket.
Yeah, obviously, as you said, kind of feels odd to be writing on it in a cricket context when it's so much more important than that. But yeah, through a cricket prism, I mean, it's been 11 straight men's ICC events when India and Pakistan have been drawn in the same group. I mean, drawn is probably the wrong word here because
draw's an interesting way of putting it.
Well, what are the odds of that happening? And basically, as we know, that game is so valuable that broadcasters are desperate to happen. And there's been a weird irony, actually, where because of the geopolitical situation with India and Pakistan not playing in bilateral cricket, that's actually probably made the value when they do play ICC events a little bit higher. And we talk about so often, too much cricket and a lack of scarcity. Well, India Pakistan is the one game that still has had that scarcity, so it's made it really valuable. And you can't put a figure on it exactly, but people I've talked to said it's not unreasonable to think it might be worth as much as a tenth of the total ICC broadcasting rights is that match being every time, which kind of makes sense. You think of, all the people who flying around the world. That the New York Times said it was bigger than the Super Bowl, which in terms of worldwide viewing figures is certainly true. They got about 400 million watch each game, and just what that is, what's that kind of the buzz it gives to cricket as well. There's an interesting thing where matches that happen in a tournament after India Pakistan, and all things being equal, get more viewers than those that happened before, because a lot of people, they kind of clock into, there's a world event happening when that game happens. So clearly we'll have, financially, actually, basically every country could be affected if this game ceases to happen, because of most countries are relying, not really England, Australia, or India, but most other countries get the bulk of their revenue from the ICC. So if suddenly you got a 10%, and already there was talk that the broadcasting market in India might be a little bit diminished. So it's come at a very bad time from the ICC again to just see it through the kind of cricket lens.
Yeah, I think it's important to reiterate that there are bigger things in life than cricket and the finances of cricket. And we just wish everyone in Pakistan and India to stay safe at this very troubled time. So also more breaking news a couple of days ago, Rohit Sharma deciding to retire from Test match cricket. Did that surprise you? Because in the interviews he has given, he was talking about looking forward to the England tour. So it did come slightly out of the blue to his retirement from Test match cricket.
Well, implicit in your question there is, was that retirement completely his own decision, or did he get a sense that, he was about to be pushed or the axe was coming? Because there was a report, wasn't there? I think it was in the Indian Express, the day before the announcement from Rohit that the selectors had decided to move on. So that's speculation. We don't know. But ultimately, the decision didn't come as a surprise, because it's a bad combination for any captain, as you know, and as I know well. If you're losing games and you ain't getting any runs, and India had lost 5 out of the last 6 matches under Rohit's captaincy, the 3 against New Zealand and a couple in the Border Gavaskar, and his form had really tailed off. And of course, that's a bad combination for any captain. He's 38, massive depth of talent in Indian cricket. So, given that level, that depth of talent, and the competition, it means that you're not going to be so patient when form or results go against you. So, in that sense, I didn't think it was that much of a surprise. But always sad when a Test career comes to an end. He's been a significant cricketer. Not, the record or his statistics wouldn't suggest of the very top rank in terms of Test cricket. I think people will look at him, and his best format is ODI cricket. He's going to go down as one of the greatest ODI openers, isn't he? But a funny Test career. He had to wait for a long time to get in. And then almost a career of 2 halves in Test cricket, averaging just a tick over 40 in the end, with a dozen hundreds. Means, it's a successful record, but not quite a stellar record.
Tim, if you'd written your book a couple of years later, how would you have written up Rohit Sharma's reign as a player and as a captain?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is I said, I mean, he was 32 by the time he kind of got into the Test team full time, and so his generation obviously is a stellar player in white ball cricket, but he still clearly had the urge to give Test cricket a go, and he had one of those. He was originally batting lower down at kind of 5 or 6 in Test, and he became an opener, and really was almost a bit from the sort of Sehwag school of bringing in his white ball game to Test cricket. And actually, I think he played some great innings on very difficult wickets. I think the innings against England at Chennai in 2021 on a raging turner, really, and he, I think, got 150 on the opening day. So he was one of those who often in difficult conditions could perform his best, which is, again, talking about his average. Well, he's played in a slightly harder era for batting than maybe a decade earlier. So that average is probably a little bit better than it's going to end up looking.
Well, I enjoyed watching him bat, that is for certain. He seemed to have more time. He will carry on in 50-over cricket, he has said. I enjoyed him as a captain as well. He seemed to get that right balance between being tough with his players, but also you can tell from the sort of outpouring of love from the players that they enjoyed having Rohit as captain.
Interesting that, isn't it? Because a massive contrast to the guy who he took over from. I mean, Virat, very expressive, very dynamic captain, trying to make things happen all the time. I suppose a bit Stokes-like in that regard. Hardly an over went by without him, changing something. Whereas Rohit was a complete contrast, really. Fine line between that calmness and what you might call passive captaincy at times. But I think you're right. The players enjoyed, if you play for the India team, and it's like a goldfish bowl, isn't it? And every comment and every action is poured over for significance. So to have a guy there who's quite calm, I think the dressing room would have enjoyed that. But I thought his style of captaincy was very different from somebody like Virat. I actually enjoy watching that slightly dynamic captain who gets in there and likes to change things rather than the passive style of Rohit.
And replacements for the England tour, Tim? I mean, Virat is an option. I'm sure Virat will throw his hat in the ring. Then you've got Jasprit Bumrah, who has been vice captain, Rishabh Pant, KL Rahul. Shubman Gill's been going well in the now suspended IPL. Who any other candidates, or who do you think?
I think from the IPL, actually, India have so many guys who've got experience of captaincy in high pressure environments. So this is probably an easy decision in a way that would have been historically for India. I think Bumrah obviously has been vice captain. He's captained very well when he's done it, but I think he's had recent injury issues. I do think, I know Pat Cummins done a great job with Australia. I think giving it to Bumrah, given his injury record, would be a little bit of a risk, but maybe you get to a stage where it's okay if you miss the odd test. Shubman Gill, possibly the favourite if it wasn't Bumrah. I think going back to Vera seems a little unlikely, but yeah, for a one-off tour, I guess anything's possible. But yeah, I do think from the IPL, India players have a lot of experience of captaincy in high pressure environments, so that should sort of stand them in good stead for making this decision.
And from an England point of view, do you think England and Stokes, they meet up in a camp next week? Do they think this is an opportunity now with no Rohit at the top of the order, another captain, maybe a younger, inexperienced batter coming in, or do they just think whoever comes in will be a good player?
I mean, that's a given, isn't it, with India? Mentioned the depth of talent there a minute ago. Whoever comes into the team is going to be clearly a top-class cricketer. I think if it was Shubman Gill, it's quite interesting because he's had a pretty successful time of it in Tests, but not, you wouldn't say he's absolutely dominated, has he?
He's struggled away from home.
Yeah,
recently
exactly.
away from home. Yeah,
He's got 5 Test hundreds and the average is 35. So he's obviously had some success in Test cricket, but he's shown some vulnerabilities as well. I think he's played 3 Tests in England and not really. I mean, those Tests have been intermittent, but he hasn't really shown that he can crack English conditions yet. So that they may look at something like that as an opportunity, and depending if the conditions for the Tests are like the county championship has been in April, then it's going to be a run-laden and run-filled summer because the pitches have been very flat and very slow. But I think, yeah, Bumrah did it very well when he did it in the Border Gavaskar. He did that first game, didn't he, in Perth, and did it really well. But 5 Tests in 6 weeks is a significant ask for a fast bowler. Pat Cummins has shown there should be no bar to a fast bowler becoming captain. They can do it perfectly well, but that is that physical challenge, particularly coming back from injury as Bumrah is. So maybe Shubman Gill the favourite, and therefore a challenge for him, as you say, given his away form or form in England.
Tim, England announced their squad a week ago. Did anything surprise you in that squad? And also, with the IPL being suspended, can you see them adding? I mean, we had Mark Wood on, and he talked about how the Zimbabwe test would have been ideal preparation for Jofra Archer. Jacob Bethel was the man in possession at number 3. Will they now change it, or is it too late to change?
Yeah, I guess one of the themes of the squad was we talked so much about this kind of regime and their focus on attributes. Actually, it's a little bit more old school in terms of they've rewarded guys with Great Western County cricket. So Sam Kirk, who's been a kind of a core celeb in recent years, he's been picked. And the fact with James Drew as a backup, I interviewed him last year and he very much said, I'm not a baseball type player, but he's 21, he got 10 first-class centuries. So he's a very good player. So he's deserved his call up as well. So it's suggesting that they're actually having a bit more flexibility in their setup. But yeah, with Bethel and Archer coming back, I suspect Archer that they might think. I suspect if he was going to play this test, that would have probably impacted his training kind of already. So I wonder if that comes a bit too soon for him. But with Jacob Bethel, obviously no reason that he couldn't play. But if he were to play, then that creates a dilemma. Does that mean you have a debate over Crawley or Pope?
I don't know how you feel. I'm not one for loyalty, and this is the squad we picked last week or whatever. Who's available? And you go with that. If you think these are the best 11 and you're looking for India and the Ashes, you now pick your best 11, or do you see it differently?
Well, why don't you pick your best 11 in any case then?
Because they weren't. I know where you're going to go. Because they were off playing in the IPL, so they weren't.
Well, my own view is that Jacob Bethel should have been picked, and that's the point of an England central contract, that you've got control over your players. And if you're going to put these players on a full central contract, Bethel had been moved from an increment contract to a full 2-year contract after doing so well in New Zealand, then bring your player back. It's a test match. It's an international fixture, and international fixtures should have priority over domestic franchise competition. So Jacob Bethel should have been in the original squad, in my view. And I know that the policy is that England players should see through the IPL. That's the policy. I don't particularly agree with it.
So you would have definitely, when we're at Trent Bridge, first morning, toss goes up, you would have Bethel at 3.
Well, I would have had Bethel in the squad originally. That's my argument, that he should have been in the squad originally. Now, in many ways, it saved the selectors from a very difficult call. where do you? I think Bethel did well in New Zealand, looked absolutely to the manner born in Test cricket, but then they'd have to make a tricky decision because obviously Jamie Smith comes back, and that's why Pope kept wicket in New Zealand and Bethel got his opportunity. So it saved them a very difficult call. Of course, they could now bring Bethel into the squad. I'm not sure they will, because I think they're probably happy not to have that difficult call just yet. But my own view is that he should have been in the squad originally.
Tim, do you feel there is a slight change in policy? Because there have been a lot of left field selections, the likes of Josh Hull and Shoaib Bashir when he first came, Bethel himself, not left field, but batting out of position. And now with Cook and Rue, and also your paper has been going with maybe Liam Dawson coming back into the white ball fold. Do you think there is a slight change, or is it just they've pushed so hard you can't ignore them?
No, it does feel like a bit of a shift. I think there was a joke last season among some county players that to get pitch as a bowler, you need to be averaging about 90 in Division 9, which sort of speaks to that little bit of. I think there was a bit of
You've got to be a scratch golfer, isn't Rue a scratch golfer? I understand.
As Egid just said, yeah, that was crucial in his call up. Absolutely. No, I think there was a bit of frustration amongst some county players actually, kind of feeling of what, you're putting up these great numbers, what's happening? And it feels like now there's a bit more kind of, if you do one county cricket, there is that door open, but equally, if you also have those rare attributes, then there's also a kind of a different way in as well. So yeah, obviously there was a period when it was almost like England there was a sense England were picking from left field because they wanted to pick from left field almost, and we're kind of deliberately ignoring the obvious picks in a way. Now that balance has redressed. Of course, it'll be interesting if there's a world where these guys who've had great contracts, if they come in and they don't do as well as people would probably expect, then do we go back to where we were?
The Rue selection is interesting, isn't it? As you said, he's 21. He's scored 10 first-class hundreds. What's the stat that he's the youngest since Compton to do that? You've got to go way back, so he can obviously play. But he bats at 6 for Somerset, or low down in the middle order because he's a keeper. Generally, my mate Steve James is a big thing that in order to be a top order batter for England, you should be batting in the top 4 for your county. One understands why he doesn't do that for Somerset, because he's keeping. He's also not had that much success for the Lions, has he? Or not recently, anyway. And they tend to look at that very strongly as a marker for who's getting into the Test squad. So I think that does back up your point, Tim, that this is very much a selection based on county form. And of course, I think there should, you can't have a situation where county cricket and international cricket are completely divorced from each other, because then what's the point? But there are a few things that you don't see so much in county cricket. I've watched a lot of the streams this year, and as I said before, the pitches are very slow, very low. You see very little fast bowling, very little short pitch bowling. Rue got a taste of it a little bit at the Oval recently, but fundamentally, it's a front foot game where the ball is bouncing knee high, and that can be different from quite a bit of Test cricket. If you're facing Jasprit Bumrah, Pat Cummins, etc.
Yeah, we should add that Jordan Cox was in the initial squad, but he was ruled
He's
out.
unlucky, isn't he?
Yeah. He abdominal strain. He broke his thumb, didn't he, before almost making his debut in New Zealand. So we wish him a recovery, which leads us on to county cricket. Another round of county games starting today. Did you see Jason Roy? Tim was in the squad for Surrey. I mean, I do get asked occasionally when you travel, well, where's Jason Roy? What's Jason Roy up to? He sort of disappeared slightly. Well, he's reappeared. I don't know. The toss is in 5 minutes' time. It'll be August 2020 was the last time he played a first-class game. That would be a decent story, his comeback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a slightly separate point which is interesting, is that a lot of batters do say if you just play in white ball cricket, it can be very difficult to maintain your rhythm and everything. So there's an argument, actually, we saw with Will Smeed at Somerset, actually. He retired from effectively championship cricket before his debut, then he's unretired now. And I think there is a point of view that if you're you might go to a tournament and you might be facing literally 100 balls in a couple of months. That's if you're not batting at the very top order. And so it's very hard to maintain a rhythm and everything. And I mean, obviously, Jason Roy has, he's struggled a bit in recent years in white ball cricket. So I wonder, I'm sure he wants to play for Surrey in Championship, but I wonder if there's an element of actually he does well. That will probably help his 50 over in T20 batting as well.
And it depends a little bit on the stage of your career that you're at. I mean, Jason Roy is at the back end of his career, isn't he? And I can absolutely take the point about franchise cricket, which is where it's interesting from somebody like Will Smeed's perspective. He's a young kid, right at the start of his career. And I think it's crazy to give away red ball cricket at that stage. Now, if you're in the franchise world, you might not play that much red ball cricket, but I think it's crazy to just kind of almost put it to one side, because as you say, sometimes you're just not going to be hitting enough balls in competitive matches. So interesting to see Will Smeed come back to red ball cricket, because the franchise world is very fickle. You can have a bad tournament or two and suddenly you're forgotten. And then if you're not playing any first class cricket or red ball cricket, suddenly you're a professional batter who is not facing hardly any deliveries in competitive cricket. So your game must stagnate or regress. It's certainly not going to improve. And therefore, I still think for young batters, first class cricket has a significant role to play in your development.
I also think because the red ball often tends to move a little bit more. So in a way, if you're facing that then can be good preparation for suddenly if you're facing a boomer with a white ball. Well, there's no preparation to doing that, but at least if you're used to facing a red ball and your defense being tested in that way, at least it gives you a bit more of a kind of grounding to fall back on, rather than going from kind of whacking 80-mile-an-hour bowlers to suddenly you're playing a step up, and you're really, really exposed potentially.
How much of that last round did you catch up with, Ath? I mean, wins for Warwickshire, Somerset, Middlesex, and Leicestershire. I mean, the two games that caught my eye, Somerset and Middlesex, were incredible.
Well, yeah, both chasing big scores, and really it goes back to my point that the pitches are very flat, very slow, very low, and don't deteriorate very much. I mean, Middlesex generally look to put sides in at Lords, whatever, because they know that you can chase on fourth innings without the ball actually, doing very much. And there's often a short side at Lords. There was a short side again in that game against Kent, because the championship games are pushed to the margins of the square a little bit. So it does make chasing a large fourth innings total a little easier. I mean, it's been enjoyable watching the Kent Championship streams or keeping tabs on the games. Obviously, we have that long run in now, the way the schedule is, which may not be that way for too much longer, because they might put some 50 over cricket at the start of the season. But you get about 7 championship games, and the weather, of course, has made a big difference. There's been very few games rained off, or very few days rained off. And so we've seen a lot of close games, a lot of good games that have gone to the wire. I mean, it's a terrific win by Warwickshire over a strong Yorkshire side who had, Brook and Root back for them. But I would say the standard of bowling is pretty variable at the moment, and combined with the slow, low pitches means that there's a lot of runs being scored. I wouldn't say cheap runs, but I think the standard of bowling is variable. And of course, with say 7 championship games, is this the 7th, 6th or 7th? I can't remember exactly how many, but that puts a lot of, if you're a county that's playing 6 back to back, that puts a lot of emphasis on your bowling resources. And Kent were right down to their bare bones at Lords last week. I mean, they had to get an Essex player in on loan, because I mean, they looked strong batting wise, but their bowling looked right down to its bare bones. So it's been interesting to watch for a number of reasons.
Yeah, if I could just, I think a couple of weeks ago we saw with Durham, they basically rested their whole first choice fast bowling attack, because they said, I think they'd played 3 rounds. They said these guys are knackered already. And we talk about, championship cricket wanting it to resemble test cricket as much as possible. Well, actually, even if the players are, similar or the same in some cases, they have to manage themselves so differently. So that's going to mean that the average speed, obviously, the England selectors love looking at the speed guns, so that's going to be a lot less and stuff. Less short balling, everything. So that is a real issue. I mean, to play six in a row, you're just pacing yourself. And you talked actually you talk to overseas fast bowlers and they say, of course, I'm going to bowl completely differently in the championship to in Test cricket because, A, the schedule, and B, of course, if you're an overseas fast bowler, they want you to play every game and they probably make a trade-off that you're going to be bowling 80, 85 mile an hour, but they want you there for every match.
Yeah.
Okay, just hearing, it's like Sky Sports News, this IPL definitely suspended. It's now official, the IPL has been suspended. So, as I said earlier, more important things than cricket at these sort of times. Wish everyone in India and Pakistan well and stay safe. But the only reason you're in, Tim, was because you kept WhatsApping me and Ath about your book, the
He's done every podcast going promoting this book. I mean, I hope the sales eventually rise. How many podcasts have you done now? We must be about the 6th podcast you've done.
You were first choice, though.
We wish that we could say the same about you. So tell us, why did you do the book? Why did you do the book? And what did you learn about? I mean, you know your cricket, you love your cricket. What specifically did you learn that you didn't know before starting it?
So the book was sort of hatched. It was March 2020 in Sri Lanka on the sort of cursed COVID tour. I had dinner with Simon Wilde, who wrote a very good history of England. And I was sort of saying, someone should do this for global Test cricket. He was, I can't be bothered. And I was like, okay, no. Which sounds like him. And then I said, okay, maybe I'll have a go. And then 5 years later, talking to the great and the good, including both of you guys. So thank you very much. I've ended up with this. It was a lot of fun to do. I mean, one of the big themes, actually, the kind of eternal myth in Test cricket, everyone says, oh, it's such a conservative game, so stuck in the past. I mean, actually, the game has evolved endlessly, really. You talked about, 100 years ago, most testing would be 3-day matches only and things like that. You have the number of boards and over changing, the number of teams goes from 2 to 12. You have day-night matches. It changes in scoring rates, innovations, uncovered pitches, another big one. And the game has changed so much over time. And I think one of the reasons it's 148 years old now, Test cricket, is it has adapted. And maybe people say it should have done more at times and so on. But yeah, the idea that this game is just a fixed thing in the ground and it doesn't move, that is just not true at all.
If you could transport yourself back in a time machine to one particular decade of the 150 years that almost 150 years that you've covered now, which decade would you go back to? I know they talk of a golden age of cricket way back, but what was the most important or interesting decade, do you think, for Test cricket, if you could go back and watch it?
Yeah, very good question. So I think as a sort of summer, 1902 Ashes, which is when you have Victor Trumper is the first ever man to score 100 before lunch on the opening day. Have the 100 from Gilbert Jessup, which is still a record, and that kind of embodies the golden age. And I guess it was called a golden age because these leaps in batting. It was a much more entertaining game than it had been before, and you have a sense of kind of batters are kind of there for a good time, not particularly a long time. That's very important in the evolution of the game. But then if you look from a global point of view, I think the 1950s is odd because it's actually the cricket is quite turgid and dull at times. But that is actually when Test cricket really goes from being about England and Australia to being a global game. So like until 1950, 3/4 of Tests had involved England as one of the two opponents. So it was almost like a series of bilateral engagements with kind of England in the middle. And then from the 50s and 60s, you obviously get with India and Pakistan, that rivalry, and India developing. West Indies first beat England in 1950. That's a huge moment. So you begin to get Test cricket becoming a kind of a broader game, and you have the 1960-61 series between Australia and West Indies. That's a really pivotal one because 50s had been quite a dull decade, and then there's a chat between Don Bradman, who's the chairman of the Australian board. He talks to Richie Benaud and Frank Warren before the series and sort of urging them to play more enterprising, exciting cricket. You then have the socio-political significance of, Warren was the first black captain with tenure of West Indies at the time, so that adds a whole other huge layer to it. And then you have this perfect storm where the first test of that series is a tie test, and then the series is an epic, a 2-1 to Australia. And fair to say, with neutral umpires, many people think that would have been the other way around. Of course, neutral umpires is a huge way in which the game's developed as well.
Yeah.
I found the captaincy side interesting. You touched on there with the West Indies having white captains and maybe captains from depending on what island the game was being played. England not having, well, they had amateur captains until what was it, Hutton and whenever.
Yeah.
So India didn't always pick their best captain. They just picked some random to be captain. You just think now,
We
apart
did
from
that in the 90s with you, Nas. Why do you think you got the gig?
You just got in before me there, to be honest. So just after the 90s, we started picking our best captains. So it's incredible how it used to be done.
No, it's mad. So the first 10 Ashes tours that the MCC run, so from 1903 to 1951, so 50 tests, the total average of all England captains is 22. So you sort of start with, that's because they were amateur. They were, yeah, I was going to make the joke, but I didn't feel able to. And so you start with, you have a captain who's basically not worth his place in the side on average, and then you're kind of reverse engineering the rest of the team around them, and that's a huge reason that held England back. But yeah, the idea was the captain had to be amateur, who was unpaid, but unpaid again is kind of in inverted commas because they'd often get expenses that were worth more than the professionals. And Jim Laker in the 50s, he asked England if he could revert to being an amateur because he worked out he'd earn more money, and I said, no, you're the wrong kind of chap to be able to do that. So it's, yeah,
I mean, that's not specific to Test cricket. I know your book is a history of Test cricket. I mean, that's the game reflects society, doesn't it? The sport itself has always reflected how society is and continues to do so. The kind of brash commercialism of the IPL reflects way India has gone or is going, and the issues that you talked about there of race and class, and that's just the sport reflecting society as it was.
Yeah, I think Test cricket throughout history has reflected society, but I think it's also been an agent in terms of putting it back on society. I think it has at times. You talk with in the West Indies. So CLR James, the great kind of writer on West Indies cricket and historic. He very much saw Frank Worrell becoming captain as linked to the wider struggle for independence in the region. So he didn't see it as just a cricket thing. And I think he had a view that Worrell becoming captain may have accelerated that process a little bit. Obviously, the apartheid ban for South Africa, that was so important, and the fact that the South African government was so desperate to keep Test matches going and basically pretend everything was fine. That shows the importance of that. And we had this bizarre thing where at the time you had to be a member of the Commonwealth to play in Test matches officially. And South Africa were kicked out of the Commonwealth in 1960 because of apartheid. But England, Australia, and New Zealand just ignore their own rules effectively and carry on playing Test matches against them, which is how linked, I guess, yeah, Test cricket was to those power structures. And you go back to the formation of the ICC, so it was 1909, and the keyword was imperial. So it was, at the time, you had to be a member of the British Empire to be in the ICC, and that excludes USA and Argentina, who are actually very strong cricket nations at the time, and we could have all been going on tours to New York or Buenos Aires in a parallel universe.
There's traditionally thought to be three great Test teams, aren't there? Bradman's Invincibles just after the Second World War, the great West Indies team of late 70s through to mid 90s, and then the Australian team from that late 90s through to 2005. Are there other teams that should be considered in that bracket, or are we right to just think of those three?
Well, I think yeah, looking before Bradman's Invincibles, we are looking at really an era of two big Test nations, so it's difficult. But yeah, there's some early Australian teams at 1902 that I talked about, but I think in the kind of era of Test cricket being a proper international sport, those are the three that stand out. I think just below, I think Graham Smith's, again, and not just because Nasser's here, but Graham Smith's South Africans are really formidable in terms of they got 9 years without losing away from home. I think, yeah, they're superb team, very, very adaptable, and you go through the talent in terms of Callis, AB de Villiers, Smith, Steyn, Morkel, so on. Yeah, Amler, a phenomenal team, and probably because a little bit, they would say, and probably rightly, because they're not from a big three country. If they were a big three country, I'm sure there'd be heaps and heaps written about how great they were in books and everything. I think that the Pakistan team, actually, Imran Khan's in 1980s, are a terrific team. And I think a kind of great, somewhat semi-forgotten rivalry, which I talk about a lot in the book, is the Pakistan-West Indies late 80s. So they had these 3 series, which are all drawn 1-1. Imran Khan in these is just ridiculous. I think he averages like 14 with the ball across these 9 games and plays some great innings with the bat as well. And they hold West Indies in the Caribbean 88. And again, that's none of those tests where people say neutral umpires, there was some Abdul Kabir, LBW appeals, things could have been really, really, really different. I also think the kind of recent India team is not far off that category. I was looking at it in terms of their record.
I was going to ask you, when did you see that? When did you see that change happening? And in fear of incurring the wrath of Sunil Gavaskar again, why you're right in the book. Why, explain to us why you feel before maybe Kolkata 2001, why before that era and this era weren't they as successful as they are now?
Well, I think just to take a step back, it is remarkable. I mean, one of the big things in the book I kind of realized the extent of was frankly how bad India were for so long. So until the 2000s, in every decade, they are losing more matches than they're winning.
You know, we're going to clip up that little 10-second thing about how bad India were before, and you're going to go viral now on the internet.
Sunil will be at you straight away.
And actually, the way the game's run, one of these weird nuggets I found. So India win a test in the 60s against New Zealand, and their reward is to be docked a 5th of their salaries for the game, which is obviously like kind of crazy. And the reason is because they win in 4 days, and the Indian board has no money, and they say it's on a per kind of DM basis, and because you've only needed to be there for 4 days, you're getting docked some of your money. So what helps India? But I think a lot because there's not a lot of money in the game, you basically get, in a way, only players who can afford to play actually do. So you get a huge dominance in terms of where Indian get their players from. It's basically sort of 5 big cities provide the bulk of their players. So you're not getting talent from outside those big places. There's a real lack of fast bowlers, which persistent thing, and you begin to get fast bowling academies from the 80s to start to redress that balance. Just the kind of professionals, because of the lack of money in the game, a lot of good standard players are retiring in their mid-20s who are, in their domestic game, who are not, not in test level yet. So you have a situation where India are reliant on very few players, not getting anything like the kind of the best of their talent, and things like nutrition and stuff are not very well developed in terms of the players. So the players are not actually, I don't think the players are given the chance to fulfill their potential. And even things like captaincy and selection is, you're getting nothing like the best 11 Indian players out on the park. So I talked with Sachin Tendulkar, and he wins away from home, wins one of his first 44 test matches, which is, and despite being such a great player, is remarkable. And there was this quite sad story tells me. So in 1997, India in Barbados, and they need 120 to win after sort of day 3, and I think they're 4 for none. Tendulkar goes to a restaurant on the kind of cliffs in Barbados on the sea, and he asked the waiter to get him a nice bottle of champagne to chill it, and he says, "I'll be back here to drink it tomorrow." The next day, we kind of know what happens now. So Ambrose and Walsh do what they do to so many other teams. India bowled out for 80, and Tendulkar does not go back to that restaurant. He remains sort of in his room for a couple of days and says he's the most devastated he's ever been on a cricket field. And that, I guess, was quite common for India at that time. They were obviously a formidable team at home, but away from home didn't really have the tools.
Before we just look to the future Test cricket and the World Test Championship and its importance and all that, I asked you to put together an 11 of the most significant Test cricket as a way of maybe, understanding the journey that Test cricket has been on. What did you come up with, if indeed you could be bothered to?
No, I did. I did my homework. Yeah.
Go on. Give me your most significant Test cricketers 11.
Again, the keywords are significant. This is not my best 11. This is significant ever. So I've gone with Victor Trumper as an opener. He still scores faster per hour than any man in history. Boys, the golden age. And very glamorous figure. We still kind of think of him now. Jack Hobbs is our other opener. We talked about that amateur professionals divide in England, or he gets what's seen as the ultimate praise, which he is described as a professional who bats like an amateur. And he's an unbelievable, record number of first-class centuries, and helps to break down that divide.
That could be said about Atherton, a professional that batted like an amateur, to be honest. Carry on. Me at 3. Who are you having at 4?
Yeah, Nasser was squeezed out by Ranji. It was a close call at 3. But I went for Ranji because he opened up, the inventor of the leg glance, at least the kind of man who popularized the leg glance. I think just in terms of like the way we watch cricket, that still owes a lot to him opening up that bit of the field. I have gone for Sachin at 4. Obviously, the only man to play 200 tests, but in terms of embodying the rise of India, you just think of India.
Like any good author, you're thinking of book sales.
Prioritizing people I talk to. And yeah, you go from 89 to 2013 to 20. I mean, to play 24 years is phenomenal, and that comes. He starts out really before the liberalization of the Indian economy, and by the time he's done India the complete super battles, he's definitely more famous than any cricketer had been before, and arguably that still is the case actually, even Virat Kohli and so on. Frank Worrell is my number 5 and is my captain. Actually, we forget, just take away all that stuff. He's absolutely fantastic all-rounder as well, batting all-rounder, but a really brilliant cricketer. And then you add on the fact that he was, the first black captain of West Indies, and also the first to really lead them to be number 1 in the world. We don't really have the rankings, we know them then, but he's the first man to lead West Indies to be number 1 in the world. And that again has big social political importance beyond that. Gone for Gary Sobers at number 6. Again, perhaps the best ever Test cricketer. You can argue with Bradman, but given that he's an all-rounder, you can make the case. And clearly such a...
So Bradman isn't in this team then?
No, he's not in the team. Because I think as great a player as he was, actually his technique not that many people kind of follow. And I bet he has that significant...
You've gone for the Rob Key school. You've gone for the Rob Key school of selection. Don't worry about averages. A bloke who averaged 99 and a bit in Test match cricket doesn't make your all-time great Test match side. You have been bad.
You've done me there.
Most significant 11.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, so after Sobers,
I've gone for Gilchrist at 7 because I think he is a great player. But so actually, if you look at the history, batting out, you guys obviously know with Stewie and everything in the 90s, the batting averages of keepers were going up. But the Gilchrist shift is to accelerate that, A, and B, you get a shift in strike rate. So keepers used to bat actually like normal batters. Now, after Gilchrist, they become more attacking than the kind of normal top 6 batters. Shout out for Les Ames, who in the 1920s starts that process. But no, I've gone with Gilchrist. Bernard Bosanquet at number 8, a bit of a left field pick, but inventor of the googly. So I think he earned something for that. Gone for Wasim at number 9. You're part of that great Pakistan team. I talked about 80s and early 90s and reverse swing. Not the inventor of it, but probably the man who's done it better than anyone in history. Unbelievable player. Harold Larwood at number 10. So he is the kind of the villain, actually the villain and the scapegoat of Borderline. So he bowls into he finds a way to cut Bradman down to size. I mean, Bradman's averages 50 on that series, but he cuts him down to size, relatively speaking, bowls into a great victory. And then, kind of typical of the day, he's then made a scapegoat Parade. So he never plays for England after that series, which is very unfair. And I've gone for Murali at number 11. So I argue in the book that Murali added more Test wins to his country that they would have got compared to had he not played than any player in history, because he comes into not a great side and makes them very, very formidable. He's obviously also, he's the man that he ignites so much controversy over throwing. So he leads to the no ball balls being looked at. And there's this weird thing which no one really expected, which is that because of Murali, science is brought to this process. His action is shown actually to be better than people thought, and also some actions that we thought as really pure, actually they had a kink in as well. So he kind of, in a way, he shows that everyone at the time was not having a completely straight, was bending their arms somewhat. Phenomenal player, and the rise of Sri Lanka as well. So there's 11. I mean, Bradman, Warren, George, Esri, Viv Richards. So plenty of, but this is significant, not best.
Tim, can I ask you a question? Are you going to do the Ashes down under in the winter? Because no Bradman and no Shane Warne in your significant cricketers in Test match cricket.
Keith Miller, a few others as well. No, I know it was very difficult to pick, but yeah,
Well, a fascinating 11, and in a way that encapsulates your book. Really, I suppose that it's a fun way of looking at all the trends and most significant ways in your book. Now, what about the future? Because I mean, for as long as I can remember, people have been saying Test cricket's on its last legs, but those voices have become more acute, or that worry has become more acute in the last 15, 20 years. And the concerns over the nature of the World Test Championship. How long has Test cricket got left?
So again, look at the history. People in the so-called golden age, they're like, no one's watching this thing anymore. The games go on too long. Some of these arguments, actually, the important thing that you do pick up, the arguments are quite circular. Certainly when World Series cricket again comes in the 1977, people think that will be the end for Test cricket. No one's going to want to watch anymore. So providing that context is good. That all said, I think Test cricket is under a threat in a way like never before, because the sheer amount of money in other formats, and then you have the kind of just global entertainment market, which I know is a bit of a cliche to say, but it's kind of, it competes with everything right now. So it is under threat. That said, I think the fact I talking to so many of the greats of the game for my book, I really did get a sense of how proud they were to be part of this story, actually. And there is still such a reverence for those who've kind of played before, and a recognition of just how bloody hard this game is to play. In terms of, I remember I talked to Pat Cummins, he talked about the kind of niggle worm, which is that during a test match, when you go to sleep, you kind of go to sleep on the bit to kind of protect the bit of you that hurts the most, and half an hour later you're waking up because another part of you is hurting the most, and just how that brutality of it, the kind of physical and mental side. So there is a real respect for players for that. But that's, I think the World Test Championship is a really, really important device. When I talked to sort of Kane Williamson, he said, yeah, this is completely the best day in New Zealand's Test history and stuff. And I think, again, from the kind of big three point of view, that can seem a bit incongruous. But I think Australia and India give the World Test Championship kind of more kudos and respect than England have done so far. So for me, I would, I suggested in the book, I think the World Test Championship needs to be much simpler and go something like 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. No percentage of points contested. Very, very simple. I mean, especially given what events we talked about earlier, you will not be able to have a system where everyone plays everyone, which is not ideal. But a lot of American sports do that. The Champions League now has a similar structure, so that's not in and of itself disastrous. I think, for the good of Test cricket, a much better, when say New Zealand play South Africa, it would be much better for Test cricket if that was 3 tests of 4 days each than if it was 2 tests of 5 days each. So and you look at the way the game is played now. So I think I would say every series you have this current structure of World Test Championship today, but you play 6 series. Each series is 3 matches of 4 days each. 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. Makes for a simple league table, and then Border Gavaskar, Ashes, and so on. You can play extra matches outside that, but at least having a table which everyone can understand, and crucially gives every country a chance to get to that pinnacle. It's very dangerous if you have a situation where only 3 countries think they can reach the pinnacle of their sport, and that's the kind of thing that could encourage more players from South Africa and so on to leave Test cricket behind.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't think we've got any more to add. We'll look forward to listening to you on another podcast. Plugging the book in
got no more to do. He's all podcasted out.
And we will see you at Trent Bridge, where England play Zimbabwe in less than 2 weeks' time. Now, I'm hearing Jason Roy is playing for Surrey today. He starts back on his first-class path today. Who have we got next? We've got Alistair Campbell, the former Zimbabwe captain. He's joining us for commentary in that Zimbabwe Test match, and he's on the podcast next week to talk all things Zimbabwe cricket. We'll catch up then.